Yeah, hi folks. Yes, the latest IPCC propaganda report has been released, and as predicted, it's full of doomsday scenarios designed to scare the hell out of left-wing bedwetters and children who have nothing to compare with. Yes, catastrophic fires and floods, far worse than we've ever seen before, except we've seen them all before. But anyway, folks, before covering that report, did you know this?
To the UK, where they're woke, Sky News, not like ours. They're very woke over there. They're warning the masses about climate change destroying their sex life.
Climate change is going to affect your sex life. Here's how. Firstly, there's a small matter, literally, of pollution changing our bodies. In fact, boys are being born with smaller penises. It's all because of the chemicals used in manufacturing plastic.
Buckle up, there's more, much more. You see, the Poms are terribly worried about having warmer nights. It's a big problem over there. And you know what warm nights mean? No sex and no babies, apparently.
But here is some bad news. Our sex drives drop when it's hot. In the US, one very warm day led to 1,000 fewer births 9 months later.
But some people can't handle the heat. They're not going to want to be touched. They're not going to want to be bothered.
Yes, they used as their example a 56-degree day in America to prove that a possible 1 degree rise in temperature would see birth rates plummeting. Dear God, it only gets worse.
Back to those plastic chemicals, they're also affecting men's fertility. Some scientists believe most men will be infertile by 2045.
Procreation, only folks look at it as, if I can't produce, then who am I? There's some folks that think like that. But there's also some folks that have had children and can't take care of them. You can still help someone grow into the person that they are meant to be, right? And yes, they may not come from your womb, but you can still be a parent. So I think also even looking at it as, what is a parent to you? Asking those type of questions.
But the climate change catastrophe won't just destroy your sex life and see masses of men become infertile. It will see an explosion in female sea turtles who will have less male sea turtles to breed with. Stay with me now.
Sea turtles bury their eggs in the sand. The temperature of the sand affects the sex of their children. Cooler sand creates male turtles, so global warming could mean we have too many female turtles. Scientists predict that by 2030, just 2% of hatchlings will be male. Bad news for a lot, and there really will be a lot of female turtles.
My gosh, look at how sad that sea turtle looks. Maybe it's strayed into Australian waters and is about to become a victim of native title hunting. But
it's a wake-up call for the world. Planet Earth is warming at an alarming rate, and it's up to all of us to do something about it, and quickly, to avoid catastrophe. The landmark study on climate change from the world's top scientists is being called a code red for humanity.
Oh no! Oh no! It's a code red! It's a code red for humanity!
We're seeing it already, but highly significant report warns of more extreme heat waves, wildfires, flooding and drought, unless greenhouse gas emissions are reduced. We'll have the global picture shortly. First, Kate Nicol-Williams looks at whether New Zealand's doing its bit to make the world a safer place.
It packed a punch. Cyclone Fehi battered the Nelson Tasman coast in 2018.
And it came up to about here.
So the seawater came up to about here. But if you look behind over here, you can see his seawall is higher than his house.
We had 500,000 litres of seawater right through this property.
And now you can see him walking up on top of his seawall, which is huge. So it's obviously been there for years. This is not a recent event, folks. This has been there for at least 70 years or more.
McFarlane rebuilt his seawall after the cyclone, and another which followed soon after.
So this is 600 mil higher than...
So you can clearly see that his seawall here is high or is the same level as his upper floor. And we're supposed to buy this BS. Anyway, I'll just fast forward a bit.
So Kate joins us now live from Wellington's South Coast. Kia ora, Kate. So a lot to process. What is the advice for the public?
Yes, well, it's a calm night here in Ōwhiro Bay tonight, but just a couple of months ago, that was a completely different scene. A local state of emergency was issued and residents were asked to evacuate when there were large waves and high winds that strewn debris across the road, and one house was affected.
Oh, one whole house was affected.
It also happened last year during the COVID-19 lockdown to a larger scale. So this is just one part of the country that is often having to prepare for extreme weather. And
Anyway, I'll just fast forward again.
So no matter what we do here in New Zealand, we're still just a tiny player compared to the planet's big polluters. The worst are the highly industrialised countries of China.
China building 227 coal power plants.
Tell you what, Daniel, thank God for the IPA. I mean, these are exactly the sort of hard facts that have gone missing in the whole climate debate.
Well, you know, on this show, we live in the real world, and here's the real world. James Morrow wrote today about a report which came out from the IPA. China emits carbon emissions in 16 days, what Australia does in an entire year. They are going to continue to increase their carbon production till 2030, and they don't promise to get to zero until 2060.
India and America. Our US correspondent Anna Burns-Francis looks at the global picture.
For more than a month, California has been burning.
And it has been burning every year for as long as I can remember.
It's scary when you sit there and see all the smoke coming over the mountain and wonder where's it at because you can't see.
The Dixie Fire is still roaring, still out of control, claiming every town in its path.
Look at all these people that are in this place now. Where are they going to go?
Heat waves across North America, flooding in Germany, India and China, wildfires in Greece. Climate change is here, and its cause, mankind, the only ones who can fix it.
The world listened, but didn't hear. The world listened, but it did not act strongly enough. And as a result, climate change is a problem that is here now. Nobody's safe, and it's getting worse faster.
The United States greenhouse gas emissions, a direct cause of climate change, are second only to those of China. Both countries will have to make enormous environmental and political shifts if climate change is to be slowed.
President Biden has committed to cutting carbon emissions, investing in cleaner, greener infrastructure, renewable energy and electric cars.
Renewable energy and electric cars.
If you had to guess, what state do you think has the most electric vehicles? California. Not a surprise. But what is surprising is that during a recent heat wave, the California Independent System Operator, or CAISO, which is the organization that's in charge of making sure California doesn't have blackouts, told their citizens not to charge their electric vehicles from 5 to 10 p.m., which is essentially the main time people would be doing this kind of thing. They're not going to charge them in the morning before they go to work, and they're going to charge them when they get home from work. And you may be wondering why it's from 5 to 10 p.m. Well, many people just think this is because that's peak energy hours, and you're right. But the other thing is that California, more than any other state, relies on renewable energy. The sun's not really shining from 5 to 10 p.m., so all that solar energy, gone. So when people need to charge their cars and they need energy the most, they're not getting a main source of their energy and they can't charge their cars. Not many people realize this, but not all electric vehicle charging is uniform. There's actually 3 levels of stations. A level 1 station supplies 120 volts, a level 2 station supplies 240 volts, and a level 3 station, which is what a Tesla supercharger is, supplies 480 volts. For this next part, we're going to look at Bloomberg automotive analyst Kevin Tynan. Now, Kevin put it like this: In roughly 3 minutes, you can fill up the tank of a Ford Mustang. In roughly 1 hour of a Ford Mustang Mach-E, which is an electric vehicle, you can get about 3 miles worth of charge, and that's with a level 1 charger. So, nothing. A night charge in a level 1 charger, so charging your Ford Mustang Mach-E all night, will get you about 36 miles. You're not often told this on the news when we're told that, oh, electric vehicles are the future and all that. And they may be, but they're not the present, I'll tell you that. But so 20% of people that buy electric vehicles in California often return them soon after. The reason? The charging. The charging is ridiculous. Imagine that.
First, they came for coal-fired power. Now the net zeroists are coming for the family car. Influential think tank, the Grattan Institute, is pushing a zero-emission standard for all cars, vans and utes 2035. That is an effective ban on petrol and diesel vehicles in less than 14 years' time. According to the Grattan Institute, it's the only way, they say, to reach net zero emissions by 2050. But have a look at some of the fine print. The Grattan Institute's Energy Director, Tony Wood, says that relying on market forces alone to decarbonise Australia's light vehicle fleet is therefore a risky strategy that could well lead to millions more petrol and diesel models on the road in 2050. In other words, Australians don't want electric cars and won't buy them without massive government subsidies. We've heard this story before, haven't we? Solar, wind, now it's electric vehicles. They're all toast without taxpayer billions. And consider this statistic from the Federal Chamber of Automotive Industries. In the 6 months to the end of June, more Australians bought gas-guzzling American utes from car makers like Chevrolet and Ram than bought electric cars. Plus, sales of conventional utes, think Ford Ranger or Toyota Hilux, well, they've hit record highs, eclipsing 100,000 in the half-year stats for the first time. Those numbers speak for themselves. Make no mistake, this net zero agenda is about so much more than the environment. It's about making sweeping changes to the way ordinary people live their lives, the car they drive, the food they eat, the number of children they have.
Exactly.
Who's got the guts to stand up to all of that? All right. His take on all of this, the latest car push, when we're in broadcasting legend, my very good friend, Alan Jones. Right, Alan Jones, is there any issue on which there is a greater divide between the green left elite and mainstream Australia?
Peter.
Look where people are putting their money. They're putting it into big cars, not a Tesla.
Peter, this is just so much rubbish. Look, can someone just read the reports from the International Energy Agency? The director there, Faith Birrell, says, if you think you're going to change climate by bringing into the production electric cars, she says, then think again. Now, the first thing that has to be said about this nonsense is the electricity that will enable the car to move will predominantly come from fossil fuels. Secondly, the manufacture of the electric car will actually, the energy to manufacture will come from fossil fuels. And the International Energy Agency says, now this is a very important statistic, I think, and it says, if you then take the average time in which people will use a car and it has a limit of 400 kilometres, then you'd have to go 60,000 kilometres in that electric car to pay off the energy debt. As a result of that is the difference between the carbon dioxide emissions, which won't be emitted because it's an electric vehicle, as opposed to the carbon dioxide emissions that have been used in generating the electricity that runs the car and in making the vehicle. You'd have to, this is the International Energy Agency, not me, Peter Credlin, the International Energy Agency, you'd have to travel 60,000 kilometres to pay off your energy debt. Then, of course, you find in countries like Norway, where there is the greatest use of electric cars.
Yeah, and half of their exports come from oil and gas. Absolute hypocrites.
The subsidies are mammoth. And again, the International Energy Agency says the average subsidy per electric vehicle so far is over $24,000. And they have argued that this is an indulgence for rich people. In other words, the rich people can afford an electric car to make them feel good, and they've got another one in the garage, and they're getting all the subsidies at the expense of the poorer person who can't afford an electric vehicle.
But his target
targets are not enough, and redirecting an entire economy seems like an almost impossible task.
Big corporates blamed for burning fossil fuels are loath to change without incentive, and often solving the immediate problem takes over from the bigger picture. But there is no time left. Ice sheets are melting, and the ocean is rising.
I haven't seen it.
Even in the most conservative modelling, sea levels will still rise 0.5 metre.
And of course she fails to tell you over what period of time that rise would occur.
A heat wave that was once every 50 years is now every 10.
Anyway, now to Rowan Dean, who explains it better.
There was much excitement this week when the IPCC released their latest frenzy about global warming, or to put it in calm and cool-headed scientific terms, code red for humanity. Naturally, the world's and, of course, the Australian media went into a fever of climate change excitement with all sorts of headlines predicting all sorts of apocalyptic doomsdays scheduled for, well, sometime in the future if we don't act now. And to do so, we have to dismantle capitalism, by the way. Indeed, it was the Australian's Graham Lloyd, an apolitical reporter on climate change, who we have had on this show in the past, who was quick to point out that the IPCC's report was as much a political document as a scientific one, and, quote, that from a scientific perspective, the report does not draw any startling new conclusions. Rather, he wrote, the report is a vehicle for breathless prophecies of a looming Hadean future. And what will that future look like? Well, The Guardian opted for images of the floods in Germany this summer. Here are some cars stranded on das Autobahn. Ja, Scheiße. Not mentioning, of course, that Central Europe has a long history of such floods. Indeed, in the summer floods of 1910, there were over 1,200 deaths when the River Ahr flooded in Germany. Still, no doubt the flooded Autobahn pics scared the kiddies witless about what the future holds for them. Closer to home, the Financial Review used this photo to demonstrate the effects of catastrophic climate change getting worse in Australia, saying that coastal towns across Australia, including Byron Bay, have been hit by rising tides, washing away beaches in front of multi-million-dollar properties, and that residents at Collaroy on Sydney's northern beaches have had to pay for the construction of a 1.3 metre seawall to protect their homes at an average cost of $282,000 per resident. Scary stuff, unless, of course, you're a Northern Beaches wall builder. But, as any Sydney-sider knows, this same stretch of beach, which sits coincidentally just north of Zali Steggall's electorate of Warringah, an Aboriginal word which means, as I'm sure Zali knows, rain, waves and sea, this stretch of beachfront from Collaroy to Narrabeen has always been hit by massive waves from the sea, often during times of heavy rain. We call it erosion, but the original inhabitants called it Warringah, rain, sea and waves. Here is Collaroy Beach in 1920, over 100 years ago, nothing to do with climate change, being hit by Warringah, sea, waves and rain. And here it is again in 1966, being hit by more Warringah, sea, waves and rain. And more recently, here is the famous shot from the same beachfront in 1978, when Zali Steggall was a young nipper, so she should remember it, being hit by yet more Warringah, sea, waves and rain. And here we see a group of local firefighters helpfully putting out the sandbags at Collaroy Beach in 2016 to hold back the Warringah, the sea, waves and rain. And here we see them pretty much the exact same spot back in 1945, holding back the Warringah, the sea, waves and rain. The lesson to be taken from all of this is not to stop mining coal or to start pushing water uphill in Jindabyne, but rather, if you're going to live on Collaroy Beach, build a bloody wall. Perhaps jealous of all the attention the IPCC were getting, the climate-preaching National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association, or NOAA, leapt into the fray, excitedly declaring that July was the hottest month ever recorded on Earth, according to the Daily Mail. Wow, big call. You know, I'm sure there was a pretty hot July when temperatures reached around 3,600 degrees Fahrenheit about 54 billion years ago. But anyway, according to the Conservative Woman website, a bit of diversity there for you on Ice Age Watch, according to Conservative Women, the data shows July was not really all that extraordinary after all. They cite the Central England Temperature Series, the long-running, high-quality data set which has been carefully pieced together over many years, which reveals last month was only the 21st hottest July since records began in 1878, based on daily maximum temperatures. And according to this chart from the Global Temperature Report put out by the Earth System Science Center at the University of Alabama in Huntsville, showing monthly global troposphere anomalies from 1991 to 2021, global temperatures are no higher now than they were 20 years ago.